can support us by subscribing. The war between Ukraine and Russia continues to pose a danger to the military security borders of the countries of the world. The biggest danger is considered to be the aggressive policies of Russia. With the fiercest clashes of the war continuing in eastern Ukraine, the Ukrainian army made serious strides this week to take control. As a result of the striking attacks of Ukrainian forces in the Donetsk and Luhansk region, the Russians increased their search for military support. That's why Belarus, one of Russia's closest allies, took action. We know that the Russian army has more than 30,000 soldiers on the border with Belarus and in the surrounding cities. That's why Russian leader Vladimir Putin has literally tried to use Belarus as an offensive platform since the beginning of the war. Although there are occasional disagreements between Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko and Vladimir Putin on this issue, Russia still continues to use this country as a threat against Ukraine. On the other hand, on the 975-kilometer Ukrainian-Belarus border, against the 80,000 military forces of the Ukrainian armed forces, the 30,000-strong Russian military units in Belarus hesitates to take any steps on this border line. Despite Vladimir Putin opening a second front in Belarus, the Ukrainian forces almost started to show their strength. With its huge army of 80,000 soldiers, Ukraine has stepped up its military exercises on the Belarusian border in recent days. The details of the Ukrainian exercises on the Belarusian border are quite remarkable. In anticipation of a joint attack between Belarus and Russia, Ukrainian forces conducted military exercises near the border between Belarus and Russia. The armed forces, the National Guard, and the Security Service of Ukraine were involved in the Ukrainian exercises. In addition, Ukrainian military reconnaissance drones fly multiple times a day from Ukrainian positions deep in the dense forest, crossing the border towards Belarus, a close Russian ally, scanning the sky and ground for signs of trouble on the other side. So, Ukrainian troops are watching about 1,000 kilometers of swampy and forested border for a possible surprise attack from the north, a repeat of Russia's failed offensive on Kiev at the start of the war nearly a year ago. These exercises also mean that the Ukrainian forces have virtually surrounded the Belarusian border. In line with the exercises, the armed forces of Ukraine since the summer have been strengthening the defenses on the Belarusian border, building and widening trenches and laying mines in the forest before the spring offensive, which the military authorities are waiting for. Residents of villages in the region that were temporarily occupied last year are horrified at the prospect of things starting again. On the other hand, concerns flared over a new military move in February after Russia and Belarus held joint air force exercises a month after Russian President Vladimir Putin's rare visit to Minsk. Military experts and Western intelligence underestimated the possibility of a new northern attack, but the British Ministry of Defense agreed on Twitter that Russian aircraft and existing Russian troops in Belarus are unlikely to form a credible strike force, even though they are outnumbered to launch any attack. UK statistics also reported that the Ukrainian forces have sufficient strength against unexpected attacks on this border. This view of the UK Defense Ministry is actually just right, because there is a possibility that the Ukrainian army will send a support military force from Kharkiv and its surroundings, as well as its huge army of 80,000 soldiers against the number of Russian soldiers in Belarus. In addition, the Ukrainian army still uses mobile mock-ups of HIMARS long-range missile systems on the Belarusian border. But it is also known that the Ukrainian forces have more than 8 real HIMARS missile systems on this borderline. This is a completely confounding factor for Russian forces on the Belarusian borderline. In other words, the Ukrainian army seems ready for a possible attack on this borderline in every sense. This in turn removes Russia's power to launch an attack on the Belarusian border. On this issue, the Belarusian president abstained for a long time. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had previously warned of possible attacks by Putin's ally, Belarus. However, the Kremlin denied that it was pressuring Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko to take a more active role in the conflict in Ukraine. But according to local reports, Belarusian authorities characterized troop deployments along the border as a strategic deterrence. The authoritarian president of the country, Alexander Lukashenko, has made critical statements in recent days that he will not send troops to Ukraine. Belarusian authorities, on the other hand, plan to deploy troops to the borderline for a deterrent effect, keeping tensions constantly high on the Ukrainian-Belarusian border. Because, on the Ukrainian side, there are doubts that a threat will arise at any moment on this borderline. So Ukrainian commanders are cautious, remembering how Russia used Belarus as a launchpad in early 2022. The head of the Ukrainian Army Intelligence Unit in the region stated on a press tour a few kilometers away this week that they constantly monitor the Russian troops on the Belarusian borderline from the ground and observe the movement of the troops, if they are moving, how many soldiers, and where they are moving. In short, unlike Ukraine's eastern fronts with devastating artillery duels, there is a largely quadcopter drone warfare here, on the Belarusian borderline in the northern part of Ukraine. One of the clearest proofs of the tension in the region is that the Ukrainian army's military units on the borderline constantly change the guard, and that the movements of the Russian soldiers in this region are followed regularly every day. Meanwhile, as the Allies prepare to hold joint military exercises and measures, Moscow has warned of a collective response to any attacks on Russia or Belarus. A Russian Foreign Ministry official announced that Belarus could enter the Ukrainian conflict if Kiev decides to invade Belarus or Russia. While Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has stated that he will not send troops to Ukraine, statements of this Russian official are considered as purely escalation. The Russian army also had military exercises on the Belarusian borderline. Russian forces, which carried out joint exercises with Belarus until February, wanted to show that they were on the alert against Ukraine's attacks in this region. But Russian Foreign Ministry official Alexei Poloshchuk, in an interview with state media, announced that Russia's upcoming military exercises with Belarus were designed to prevent escalation. Could also be a signal to mobilize Ukrainian forces. But there is one small detail that Poloshchuk forgot. If an attack occurs from any side along this borderline, the numerical superiority of the Ukrainian forces in this area and the adequacy of military equipment could result in heavy and irreparable losses of both Belarusian and Russian troops. For this reason, every step taken on the Ukraine-Belarus borderline is of vital importance. On the other hand, Russia's military exercises on the Belarus-Ukraine borderline are one of the most important factors that increase the mobility in the region. Also, the exercises are constantly fueling speculation that Moscow may use its close ally and open a new front in the near future to launch a new attack on Ukraine from the north. If we consider all these military preparations, exercises and measures, in fact, Belarus supported Russia in its invasion of Ukraine, but repeatedly refused to participate in the conflict. According to Kiev, Russia continues to use Belarusian airspace for drone and missile attacks. In addition, President Volodymyr Zelensky, in a statement he shared, emphasized that Ukraine should be ready at the Belarusian border. On the other hand, it should not be overlooked that the Ukrainian armed forces has almost made a breakthrough in airstrikes, and that the Ukrainian forces will use effective unmanned aerial vehicles against any attack on the Belarusian border. You know that the Soviet-era advanced jet-powered Ukrainian drones belonging to the Ukrainian army can easily target the military resources of the Russian troops on the Belarusian border. The range of these drones belonging to the Ukrainian army is more than 800 kilometers, indicating that the Ukrainian army can almost completely control this borderline. In the coming days, we will see together whether the mutual exercise duel of the Ukrainian armed forces and Russian troops on the critical Belarusian front line will turn into any offensive action. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications in order to be informed about new videos. Our contents are carefully prepared by our expert team. This content only belongs to Divine Justice YouTube channel. We legally fight all channels, social media platforms and websites that use our content without our permission. Thank you for watching us.